Javarius, our children's director, or you can see Jessica Morales or Priscilla Carney. If you don't know them, come see any one of our ushers or myself, and we'll make introductions. And we can get your kids signed up for that. And then lastly, we had a serve team meeting last week. I want to thank you for being at that. You should have gotten a call from me. If you didn't, I was sick this week, so I wasn't able to get in touch with you, but expect a phone call from me this week. That way I can get your availability. But I also want to let you know that the children's ministry is going to be having their own training meeting next Sunday, October 29th. It's going to be at 1 p.m. following this second service. There will be food and childcare provided. Obviously, we're going to be transitioning into a new building. And as we transition, we want to make sure it's a smooth transition when it comes to everything pertaining to our children's ministry. So if you are either already serving as a children's worker, or you signed up to serve as a children's worker, or maybe you want to and didn't have a chance to sign up, please come to that meeting. We'd love to have you come out, and it's going to be a very informative and encouraging time with Zoraida. So with that being said, why don't we do this? Let's all stand up. Let's greet one another. Make a new friend here. And Pastor John's going to be with us with the word this morning. God bless you guys.
Well, let's dive right in here today. And looking forward to sharing this message with you. Can we pray? I ask the Lord would just speak to our hearts in a powerful way. Heavenly Father, so thankful to be in your house. Lord, I pray that the words that I share here for the next bit of time would be anointed, that they would lead us to a greater place of victory in our life and move us so closer to you. We pray this in your holy, your wonderful name. Amen. Amen. I've been really enjoying this sermon series, probably even a little bit more, because I just think it's something that's been so heavy on my heart, and it's this concept of counterculture, living a life that's against the grain. It's easy in life to kind of fall into this routine of our culture and go that way, but we have to really get to the place in our life that we say, I'm going to believe what God says about me, what God believes about me, amen? And that's the way I'm going to move toward the greater things in their life. And so what I want to do today is I want to talk to you a little bit about this concept simply called the current of culture. I want you to write that down. You're taking some notes. The current of culture. How many of you guys have, probably almost everybody here, you've been in the ocean before, right? Or maybe a stream or river. You understand how a current moves through water, right? I've been at times where I've been at the beach and I've been in the ocean, and all of a sudden you realize you're way down the shoreline. How many of you guys have been there before?
Yeah.
The place you set up your blankets and your tent and your towels and all that has quickly moved far away from you, right? And here's what happens is that before you know it, you're way down this, and you didn't even realize it was happening, right? You're just coming in and out of the water, riding the waves, doing that stuff. Maybe you've been in a river and you just realize how quickly it goes. And so this is what I think happens in our life. The same way that happens in water, it happens in our own life. Our culture is just moving and flowing. And before long, we can realize we are way down the current of where we ought to be without even really knowing it. And that's what happens so often. So today, I just think that this morning is a little bit of a wake-up call for us to realize the current of culture, what's really taking place. And then there's a greater term of that current. Several years ago, when I was in my last year of college, I had the opportunity, went to Southeastern University, and I was on a worship team that traveled around the country for a summer, but most of what we did was youth camps. We went and did worship at the youth camps, and then we were usually like the counselors and all that stuff. It was a great time. And so what we did 4 weeks out of that summer, we spent at the North Carolina district camp. And it was an awesome camp. And this campground, like most of the camps, they do like games and activities, and that's fun, and it kind of all takes place at the campground. But this place, it was so close, and what you did is like one day you went horseback riding. They had some other activities, but one of the days, all the campers, they got to go whitewater rafting, and it was a river called the Nantahala. How many of you guys have ever heard of the Nantahala River in North Carolina? Anybody? Nobody. Well, I'll tell you all about it. See if I can get this thing on the ground. No, it's really simple. It's a class 2 to a class 4 rapids in North Carolina on the west coast. It's amazing. So what they did with us is we never thought this. We're going to go whitewater. Oh, we'll go whitewater rafting. That sounds good. And the first day of the camp, of the first week, we took like a third of the kids up to that place, and then they had their river guides. And the river guides would go in the boats, and we would go down the river, and we had a great time. The kids had a blast, and I realized we had to watch how the guides would take them down. Now, it's very different than what you would think. This isn't like the Delaware River where, like, you know, it's reliable. These rapids, they move, they go. The very end of it is a class 4 down like a little mini waterfall that goes in. It's really crazy. So the second day we got there, it goes, okay, hopefully you guys watched what happened yesterday, because you are now the river guides, you know? And so we all said this, and so for 4 weeks, every single day of that week, we would take like some of the kids up to the Nantahala River, and we would be the guides on the boat. And we really got pretty good at taking them down the rivers. But the first few times, it was so nerve-wracking. And you go down. Now, if you've ever done real whitewater rafting, you'll learn something very quickly. You don't row during the calm times. That you don't row. You don't have to do it. The current is so strong in these that that's your time you take a break. And you just kind of, the guide would kind of sits on the back of the raft, and you just kind of use your paddle as an oar, and you just kind of rotor the thing down the river. You can just steer it right down as the current moves you down. When you get your oars out and you really go is when it really gets when the rapids hit. And that's when you say, okay guys, we got to pay attention because we have to maneuver our way through this. And so you yell right or left and move it and steer this thing down here, right? And so you go this, and it was like this little thought for me that so often in our life, not only is the current moving us, we have times when the current wants to take us into dangerous places. And we have to be on guard very quickly, because it not just because it takes you to the dangerous places. So I'll never forget that the next year after this camp, we were youth pastors in Central Jersey, and I had such a good time at this camp. I said, hey, let's take our group and let's go down to this camp in North Carolina. So we took a couple van loads. It was wonderful. And they said, well, you want to go take a raft up there? And I get up there, and I remember Susie, we were just engaged at the time, and she's like, you're going to take this raft down this river? And I was like, she's like, how are you going to do this? I was like, well, I'm not a professional, but I stayed at the Holiday Inn last night. So don't worry, we'll get down to this, but she was like, what? And we had like one of the guys fall out, you gotta pull him back in, you have this whole thing. But it's rapids, but those rough rapids, they want to take you to dangerous places, and that's the time that you have to be focused the most. You with me? And so this is what I think. I think that the current of our culture is getting worse and worse and worse and worse. It's getting rougher and rougher. This is the time we have to put our paddles in the ground, and we have to get them in the water, and we have to steer our ships in the right direction. Y'all with me? Because culture is not just kind of moving right now, it's moving fast. And we have to know what's going on with the world that we're living in. And so I kind of think of it even more than just engaging the current. How many of you guys know we're actually called to go against the current? Right? We're not just meant to like navigate the culture, but we're actually meant to go against it. That's kind of the premise of this message. And so I had this word. Sometimes when I'm preparing thoughts, I get like these word pictures. And I've seen this. You've probably seen videos or pictures of this of salmon swimming upstream. Have you guys ever seen this up the rivers? I have a little picture here of this because the salmon. This is what they do when they go to spawn. They have to go and they swim up the streams. Any fishers in here? You guys know all about this, right? You know the right times to fish. Great job. No one else raise your hand. Great job. But you sit in the front row, you think you're engaged and everybody's with you. So everybody's with you guys. You're good. So you go this way, but then this is this incredible thing because they're going back to actually where they were born. It's just amazing. You should research this one time. It's really, really incredible. But there's this thing of going against the culture. And this is us as a church that we have to look at our culture. The rapids or the currents getting stronger and stronger. And not only are we called to navigate it, which we are, we're called to go against this. It looks awkward watching them swim up these rivers and these streams, but it's actually what we're called to do. And so what we've been looking at during this series is the first week we talked about a message called the curse of comparisons. It's easy to look out in our life and just kind of look around at what everybody else has and what everybody else is doing and begin to compare yourself. Last week I taught a message simply called the lies of labels. The lies of labels that we carry on with us so much. If you missed that, please check in online. You can watch any of those messages. This morning I want to talk to a message that I know that every single person in this place deals with because it's just a reality and I know most of you and I talk to most of you. It's overcoming fear. It's something we all do. So I'm titling this message this morning, The Face of Fear. The Face of Fear. I want you to write that down. Now, how many know we all deal with some fear in our life, right? When you were a child, you probably had some traumatic experience that like kicked off some kind of fear element in your life. Maybe it was a thunderstorm. One of our guys is like terribly afraid of like storms because we were out one day and just one of those huge storms came in, and so every time it rains, he gets a little nervous. For me, it's dogs. Dogs are from the devil as far as I'm concerned. But when I was a little kid, I'm riding my bike, and this dog comes out of the house chasing me on my bike. Whoa. And I hear the owner come out of the house yelling, saying, "Killer! Killer!" No, the dog's name wasn't really killer. In my mind, it really was. Yeah. Come back, and I'm just riding, pedaling. There's this dog just on my leg. So ever since then, to be honest, I'm terrified of dogs. You know, like everybody tells me, "No, not my dog, not my." No, it's your dog. Your dog is the problem. Okay, you don't think it is, but I'm telling you, they just sense it in me. I walk in the room, and they just like. Get that guy. So when we come over for dinner, we just say, put him in another room. You know, I know your dog's not the problem. I'm the problem. I'll admit it. Don't worry. But we all have these fears, right? Maybe when you're going into high school, that first day of school, right? Those nerves, those fears that are going on in your life. And then we grow up, and all of a sudden we have grown-up problems. Now, how many know grown-up problems are a whole nother level, right? These are the real deal things of life that cause us to kind of walk through things, and they're difficult. They're difficult to navigate. I mean, you know, what is going on with my job? What's going on with the economy? Should I start this new venture? What's happening in my marriage? Where's this thing going? Maybe if you're single, am I ever going to get married? You know, some of those things that you go through in life. It's just a reality of real fears that we walk through in life, and maybe it's worried about a loved one or the health or your health or someone else's health, and you're battling these feelings of fears, and these are grown-up fears. These are really things that we deal with. And so I came across this list of life's most common fears, and this is what they come out to be. It's fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of the unknown. Now, some of you might say, I'm like going through like all four of those right now. Like I'm not walking through one of those. Like it's the whole thing, and I'm walking through this. But these are the main categories. Underneath, obviously, there's a lot of subcategories, but these are the big ones that hit home for us when you have this realize of loss or failure or rejection, the unknown. I see the unknown just stepping into things that you're unsure of, and what happens is that fear begins to step in. But I want to help us out here today, because I want to put a biblical narrative on top of this message to help us. And the good news is the Bible has a lot to say about fear. Did you know that? It's one of the overriding passages and thoughts of the Bible throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. Jesus spoke all the time, and one of his famous teachings was fear not. That they're not to fear. And so Paul takes these writings, and he writes here to Timothy in 2 Timothy 1:7. And this is what the Bible teaches us about fear. It says, "For God has not given us a," say that with me, "spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." I want you to catch those things. Power of love and a sound mind. This thing all works in our mind. It's the crucial point to this whole thing. So I want to help you something. The spirit of fear is not from God. You with me? The spirit of fear is not from God. So therefore, God wants to help us overcome these aspects of fear in our life and the spirit of fear so that we can walk into victory in our life. So this is the way I like to look at this. Fear is at the opposite scope of faith. Right? So you're either going to move in one direction with everything you go in your life. You're either going to move towards faith or you're going to move towards fear. But those two things are at the opposite end of the pendulum. You have to decide which way am I going to go. And so often we end up balancing our life towards fear. And so the hope for today is that we move our life towards faith. That's what God has called us to do. We have to properly identify the source of how we do this. So let's understand, who's the source of the spirit of fear? Well, it's the devil. Right? This is just one of his many traps he uses to take you out of what God's called you to do. So there's a great proclamation on your life. There's a great promise over your life. You have a vision that God has called each and every one of you to do. And one of the ways the enemy wants to get you off of getting you to the place he's called you to is to strike fear into you. And you walk around with the spirit of fear on your life. So we identify the source. It's the enemy. It's not from God. Okay? And so I'm not talking about like little things, right? I'm not talking about like spiders right now. You know, we're trying to look beyond that. You know, how many guys just hate spiders, right? How many hate clowns, right? Come on, I don't know. Clowns. I mean, you know, right? For my wife, it's snakes. I mean, come on, snakes. Just like we went away. We turned 40 this year, and we went down to Florida, and I was out on the golf course one of the days, and I said, "How are you?" And she's like, "Well, I'm not doing so great." I'm like, "What do you mean?" You know, we're like, this resort is beautiful here. Well, I was walking to the pool, and this snake came slithering across this. I was like, "What did you do?" I walked around the whole end of the whole place, you know, and then we're walking through, like, later that day. It was the same way to the restaurant. She's just, like, on edge and, like, walking, like, a million miles down. So, we'll be okay. It'll just, you know, kick it out of the way. But snakes, like, you know, it's like the Indiana Jones thing, you know, it gets dropped down into the tomb. It's like, snakes, why does it have to be snakes? I hate snakes, right? If you're like 30 or younger, you didn't get what I'm talking about. And, he hates snakes and all this stuff. But so we're not really talking about those. We're talking about those things that are holding us off to the greater things in life. The spirit of fear. So 2 Timothy teaches us on this whole thing. And God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. So this is my hope and my prayer for our remaining time today, is that God would begin to unlock the locks of the prison door that may be over some of your lives that have been holding you in hostage with this aspect of fear. You're going to walk out of this prison free today. That's my heart. And so first thing we have to do is we have to just begin to simply define what fear is, okay? And so I want you to write this down, because this is going to help you really grasp how this works. Fear is placing your focus on the, say it with me, the what ifs. Okay? Fear is placing your focus on the what ifs. And let me give you a scenario of how this works. So this is what we do. When we are challenged with something in our life, the first thing we deal with is like the what if. So we see a story in the Old Testament. It's a story of Moses. If you don't know Moses, Moses came and he freed the Israelites from the Egyptians. They were in slavery, they were in captivity, and this is his life. He actually grew up in the courts of Pharaoh in Egypt. He never lacked anything. He was well taken care of. He was raised spoiled, lacking nothing. And all of a sudden, one day, he is walking through Egypt and he sees a slave master kill one of his fellow Israelites, a Hebrew, and it made him so upset, he went and he killed that slave master. And all of a sudden he realized, I'm in deep trouble. And he went and ran out of the country, out of Egypt. And he's living in this place for several years. And all of a sudden, a burning bush appears to him, right? You know the story, burns, the voice of God comes out, he takes off his shoes, he walks towards this burning bush. And then God speaks to him and says, Moses, I've chosen you to be the person that's going to go back into Pharaoh's house, and you're going to get Israel, and we're going to bring them out of captivity. We're going to get them out of Egypt into the promised land. And here's how Moses kind of responded to that. Well, what if they don't listen to me? What if I can't convince them? What if Pharaoh comes again? You know, the questions instantly strike up the what ifs. So God has a calling and a purpose on his life, and his initial response to the calling that God placed on his life is, what if? Now, how do you know? Once you answer that question, you're going to quickly find out what are the real fears that you're dealing with. Because if you begin to ask the what if questions, it will describe what you're going through and how you're going to do this. And so maybe you're like I am. I know that this happens to me a lot. There'll be a challenge in my life, there'll be something that I'm going through, a struggle, and my mind instantly goes to the what ifs, you know? And it just begins to, how many of you guys, your mind's just run, right? I'm not the only crazy person here, right? And it just goes and goes and goes. And this is what happens, is then we begin to way over analyze these things, these scenarios of the worst case scenario. How many of you guys get there with these thoughts, right? It instantly goes from a fearful thought to like worst case scenario. And this, how many know this happens fast, doesn't it? I mean, it's just like a matter of a few seconds, and your brain has processed all this stuff, and it's worst case scenario, worst of the worst, and we make most of our decisions based on worst case scenario. Now I want to help you understand this, because psychologists tell us that we actually only will deal with about 8% of actual fears in our life. So when your mind begins to think of these things, of what you struggle with and some fears in your life, only 8% of those things will ever come to pass. So 92% of it you'll never deal with. Does that help you out a little bit? Because we let these things go worse, and we base 100% of our decision based on a small percentage of actually something happening about this. And so this is the most important statement I'm going to make today. I want you to write this down. I'll put it up on the screen for you. What you fear the most reveals where you trust God the least. What you fear the most will also reveal where you trust God the least. How do I define the fears in my life? I'm going to define them by where I trust God the least. Remember, fear and faith are on the opposite side of the spectrum. So when you're moving in fear, what you're really saying is, this is one area, God, I can trust you here, and I can trust you here, and I can trust you here, here, here. But I can't trust you here because I'm overwhelmed by fear. And so what you fear the most will show oftentimes what you trust